Hey guys, today I want to tackle a serious question with a sharp edge. Why is China's economy rotting from the top? And no, I didn't make up that phrase. It comes from Nobel Prize winner Daron Acemoglu, who basically looked at Beijing in 2022 and said, "Yep, this thing smells like expired milk." His essay, China's Economy is Rotting from the Head, came right after the CCP's 20th Party Congress, the one where centralization of power reached a new Olympic record. The message was clear: one leader, one narrative, one massive liability. And I can tell you from personal experience, back when I worked in Beijing finance, we used to joke around that the only KPI that mattered was the mood of the leader. We laughed about it at happy hour until we realized it wasn't a joke anymore. It happened to the whole nation. Imagine it, a whole nation's economy packed to one man's caffeine intake. Did Xi Jinping have green tea this morning? Then the stock market is safe. No tea, better short everything. That is not governance, that is sitcom. Now, plenty of people back then thought China would rocket out of the pandemic like a SpaceX launch. Instead, it tripped over its shoelaces, smashed face first into the pavement, and then insisted it was running gracefully. 2 years later, Acemoglu is holding a Nobel Prize, while China's economy is holding a closed for repairs sign. Property collapsing, jobs scarce, confidence gone. And Beijing, they couldn't just pretend it didn't happen. You can ignore some random YouTuber like me, but not a Nobel laureate with decades of experiences. So what did they do with Acemoglu's diagnosis? Exactly what insecure regimes always do: unleash a flood of clumsy hit pieces. He slanders China, he doesn't understand China, etc. Yeah. Classic stuff from little pinks. We've heard this playlist before. Honestly, the talking points were so tired, you could fossilize them and send them to some museum. The irony, by attacking him in the exact robotic way he predicted, they basically proved his point in real time. It was like watching someone deny being paranoid while checking the logs every 10 seconds. But here's the thing: time is the cruelest judge, and markets are even crueler. They don't argue, they just mark you down. And quarter after quarter, China is being marked down like clearance furniture at a bankrupt mall. Just look around. Real estate implosion, local governments drowning in debt, youth unemployment so high they stopped publishing the numbers, as if deleting Excel numbers magically gives kids jobs. Entrepreneurs losing confidence, consumers hiding their wallets, trust evaporating, and the cherry on top? Beijing is now squeezing more social security payments out of those broke companies and workers. It's like slaughtering the goose and then asking why the eggs stopped showing up. I've literally watched friends shatter perfectly good businesses just to stop the bleeding. The spreadsheet said survive, policy said don't. Guess which one wins in an extractive state? So if Acemoglu keeps nailing the predictions, what broke? Short answer, everything. Long answer, the wiring itself. For 3 decades, China sprinted, and the West scratched its head thinking, wait, authoritarian state capitalism actually works? Academics swooned. Some flirted with the model. Others wrote love songs about it. But Acemoglu's point is brutal. There was never a cheat code. The boom was real, but it carried an expiration date like milk on a summer counter. The rot starts at the top, where the rules are designed to protect the rulers first and growth second, if at all. When politics trumps feedback, economics isn't economics anymore. It's cosplay with better spreadsheets. Here's the twist most people miss. China's rise came not from tightening control, but loosening it. Limited liberalization, space for private initiative, foreign capital flowing in, Western consumers lining up, and a mountain of cheap labor. That's what did the heavy lifting. And when the loosening stopped, so did the magic. Fear spread, innovation froze, and suddenly the boom looked like a mirage. And then came Xi Jinping. Break term limits. Restore one-man rule. And you don't just break the brakes. You rip them out entirely. Mistakes don't just happen. They multiply. Zero COVID lunacy. Tech crackdowns. The tutoring bans. Boardrooms went from, is this profitable? To, is this politically safe? Translation? Are we still allowed to breathe? Because in China's system, the leader doesn't answer to citizens or markets. He answers to power itself. And power doesn't want feedback. It wants obedience. I have been in meetings where every person around the table agreed the plan was garbage, but they all approved it anyway. That is not consensus. That is survival instinct. That is how you get an economy where everyone sees the iceberg, but the ship just keeps sailing until it sinks. Now, some people say it's all about Xi's personality. Acemoglu says, nope, it is the system. Personalities matter, sure, but the deeper wiring matters more. The growth engine ran out of road, liberalize further, and you risk threatening the apex. Tighten control, and you preserve the apex, but you choke the economy. It's poison either way, and Beijing is drinking it daily. And guess which one they picked? The latter, control. Why? Because nothing terrifies an authoritarian regime more than a confident middle class with disposable income and opinions. And opinions don't come with marching orders. That's why the state has shifted from milking the economy to squeezing it dry. High social security burdens, retroactive tax grabs, private assets harmonized in the name of common prosperity. Robin Hood in reverse, except the sheriff gets a bigger pension. And China's economy today, it runs like a virus-ridden Windows 98 PC. freezing, crashing, rebooting. If control, command, delete were policy, they would be booming. The truth is, this isn't about lazy workers or clueless founders. I think Chinese workers and entrepreneurs are smart and driven. The problem is the system punishes initiative and only rewards proximity to power. Innovation by permission slip isn't innovation, it's karaoke. Some optimists might say, well, maybe China will just do a Japan, slow growth but stability. No. Japan had cushions: democracy, rule of law, massive saving, a cohesive social contract. They fell onto a mattress. China is falling into concrete. Japan's middle class stayed rich. China's middle class is staring at a mortgage they can't pay and degrees that don't lead to jobs. Japan had safety nets. China only had a propaganda nets. Which one would you rather fall into? And then there's demographics. That's not sugar-coated. China is aging fast, a shrinking workforce, exploding pension obligations. Its population number has been grossly inflated. Young people who look at marriage and kids and say, nah, I'll just raise a cat. Beijing tried everything: cash incentives, propaganda campaigns, even encouraging more dating. Nothing works. You can't legislate babies when housing is unaffordable, jobs are scarce, and everyone sees the future shrinking. A society without hope doesn't produce kids. It produces despair. That is not just a demographic problem. It's an economic time bomb. No young workers means no innovation, no new customers, no new taxpayers. It's like trying to run the engine while siphoning out the fuel. Of course, Beijing waves those shiny toys to distract the cloud: EV subsidies, Huawei chips, AI with Chinese characteristics. But real innovation needs freedom to fail, property rights, independent courts. What China has instead is forced tech transfer from the West, endless subsidies, and startups that succeed only if their founder knows the right official. That's not Silicon Valley. That's cosplay Silicon Valley. It looks like innovation on the surface, but underneath, it is the same extractive machine. And when the subsidies stop, the innovation vanishes too. Also, don't forget about banks. Chinese households earn pennies on interest. Their deposits get funneled into bailing out zombie companies, bloated state funds, and local governments drowning in debt. That is financial conscription. Ordinary people are drafted into keeping the regime solvent. You save, they inflate. You work, they squeeze. It's patriotism with Chinese characteristics, meaning your wallet funds their survival. And the elites, the so-called patriotic billionaires, check their passports, check their condos. Vancouver, Sydney, Tokyo, they cheer for the motherland on WeChat while sending their kids to pricey boarding schools in the West. If they truly believed in the future of China's economy, they would keep their money at home. But they don't. And that tells you everything. When even the insiders are heading for the exits, why should anyone else believe their bullshit story? And now here's the scary part. A stagnating China doesn't mean a quiet China. It means a frustrated, insecure China. And insecure powers may lash out. History is clear. Declining empires are often more dangerous than rising ones. A paranoid leadership, a cornered economy, shrinking legitimacy. That's the recipe for foreign adventurism. Taiwan, the South China Sea, the India border, take your pick. The irony is rich. Beijing always wanted to project strengths, but the weaker the economy gets, the more they'll have to shout, bully, and intimidate to mask it. That's not strength. That is desperation with military parades. For one generation, the sprint disguised the squeeze. Migrants, middle class, and the elites, they all got slices of pie. The escalator kept moving up, so people ignored how rigged the system was. But now, the escalator stopped by Xi, and the ladder is being, sawed off, and everyone suddenly realizes there was never a safety net. That is why Acemoglu is pessimistic. And frankly, so am I. This pyramid system always squeezes harder when the pie stops expanding. Mao squeezed with ideology. Xi squeezes with regulation. Different packaging, same instinct. Control first, consequences never. So what's next? Run stagnation. A zombie economy limping along. Or probably a Soviet-style collapse. Pick your poison, just don't accept oxygen anytime soon. When the only tool you trust is a hammer, every startup looks like a nail. This is the rot at the top. Decay dripping downward until everything beneath it corrodes. You can't fix a broken compass by sprinting faster. You can't build moonshots on permission slips. And you sure as hell can't run a modern economy on a leader's superstition, loyalty pledges, and censorship. Read Acemoglu's 2022 essay today, and it feels prophetic. 3 years later, the economy is stuck in a downward spiral. Founders feel cornered, families feel anxious, and the whole country runs like a busted app you just can't delete. And here's the kicker. Acemoglu didn't pull this out of thin air. He built it on years of research. And this is exactly what Acemoglu and James Robinson laid out in the book Why Nations Fail, which gave us a simple but deadly accurate framework. Nations rise or fall based on their institutions. And institutions come into two flavors, inclusive or extractive. Politically inclusive systems spread power out. They put checks on leaders. They enforce the rule of law. They let people argue, compete, and hold rulers accountable. Think open debate, independent courts, elections where votes actually matter. It's messy, but it keeps power from calcifying at the top. Politically extractive systems do the opposite. They concentrate power in one man, one party, or one small little clique. No checks, no accountability, no real feedback. The goal isn't prosperity, it is survival of the few rulers. People aren't citizens, they're just subjects without human rights. Now, at the economic layer, economically inclusive systems protect property, reward innovation, let markets stay open, your efforts can change your destiny, invent a product, start a business, and if you succeed, you keep the rewards, and that creates a cycle of progress. Economically extractive systems, they siphon value upward. The few at the top rig the rules to feed themselves first. Your business doesn't succeed because you are brilliant. It succeeds because you know the right official have the right connection. Markets don't allocate resources. Power does. Now, you can mix and match these systems in 4 different ways. Inclusive politics plus inclusive economics equals long-term growth. Think Britain after the Industrial Revolution, America in the 19th and 20th century. Modern democracies where competition in both politics and markets keeps the system alive. Less ideally, you have extractive politics plus inclusive economics, which leads to short-term miracles with built-in expiration dates. Think South Korea under the generals, Taiwan under the KMT in the 1970s. Authoritarian politics, but with enough space for markets and private initiative to explode into export miracle. And crucially, over time, the politics loosened. The system transitioned. That's why the miracle endured. Then there's inclusive politics plus extractive economics, which are rare, unstable hybrids, where democracy exists but oligarchs dominate markets. And then the worst box, extractive politics plus extractive economics, a system where power is monopolized and wealth is siphoned. That's the quadrant of stagnation and collapse. That is the Soviet Union. Absolute political control married to total economic centralization. Sure, they mobilized the resources fast. They put a man in the space. But no competition, no accountability, no real feedback. And eventually, the whole machine cracked under its own contradictions. So there you have it, South Korea and the Soviet Union. Both started out as authoritarian. Both grew fast. Both impressed the world. But one transitioned toward inclusive economic politics and kept compounding. The other doubled down on extraction and collapsed. Guess where China is today? Right there in the double extractive category, the Soviet one. The political system demands obedience. The economic system extracts value from the bottom to the top. That is a double lock on the door of progress. Yes, extractive systems can mobilize resources quickly. The Soviets built dams, rockets, even scared America for a while. China built ghost cities, high-speed rail, glittering skyscrapers. Concrete moves faster than consent. But here's the brutal reality. Concrete isn't prosperity. Drone footage of shiny bridges doesn't pay pensions. Ghost malls don't create innovation. Steroid growth looks great in the mirror until the handover arrives. And that is where China is now today. The bill has arrived, and it's not payable in CCP propaganda. Real creativity. It bubbles from competition and freedom. Risk is the engine. But China's system treats risk like a virus. So you get a suppression instead of innovation, karaoke instead of originality, and propaganda instead of progress. That is why the sequel is ugly. Global tailwinds fading, copycat growth stalling, tech transfer blocked, no more easy hacks. The slowdown isn't about lazy citizens. It's about a system that rewards obedience over originality. Change the code or just accept the bug. This pyramid model always squeezes. During the boom, the escalator distracted people from noticing. But once growth faltered, the squeezing got obvious. Retroactive taxes, rising fees, shrinking pensions, workers recently forced to pay more while insiders lock in their perks. Robin Hood in reverse. So where does this end? Two paths. Path 1, stagnation, anxiety, lying flat, the zombie economy. The awake either leave or detach. The rest grind forward because what choice do they have? Path 2, collapse, Soviet style. A sudden crack when the contradictions finally implode. Neither path is uplifting. That is the real meaning of rot at the top. Decay didn't start at the grassroots. It spread from the apex down. These aren't normal, cyclical pains. They're symptoms of the wiring itself. The rot at the top isn't a metaphor anymore. It is the operating system. And unless that system rewrites itself, don't expect recovery. Expect stagnation dressed up in slogans. Expect common prosperity banners hanging over shrinking paychecks. Expect innovation suffocated under permission slips. Acemoglu stated that, this will happen, and reality cashed the check. That's it for today, and I'll see you next time.